All right, friends, welcome to today's webinar. I am super excited for today's webinar. I know that seems to be a theme that I'm excited for webinars each week, but this week we have a super special guest, someone who I work with closely and also who I consider a dear friend. We have Sam Candlin today, who is going to talk to us about safety planning. So this is going to be really interesting, a lot of in-depth information. It looks like my neighbor's dogs are fighting right now, so I apologize if you can hear that. So let's get into it. Okay, so as always, we'd like to thank the Office of Violence Against Women for not only funding us, the work that we do, but also funding these super sweet webinars that we do. So thank you for that. And additionally, this webinar is interactive. Me and Sam haven't seen each other for a couple months, and we'd love for you to interact with us during this webinar. So we want to know the information that you're looking for, the questions that you have. We want to be able to give you the things and the support that you need today. So this is what your webinar control panel looks like. If it doesn't look like this, then go ahead and click that little orange arrow, and that is going to expand or retract the webinar control panel for you. Also, this raise your hand button, we will use this if Sam or I ask a question. We want to kind of know what the consensus, kind of like what the majority of people are maybe feeling, or if they've experienced, something that we ask. So let's click that. And the biggest one that we are going to use is going to be this question box. Okay, so you can ask a question for us throughout the webinar. I will be monitoring that the entire time Sam is presenting, and I will ask Sam those questions when they do arise. Okay, so I would love if everyone would type in that little question box. Tell me who you are, where you're from, what you do. Are you here for, or excuse me, are you a system advocate? Are you a Spice Girls enthusiast? Just tell me, like, why are you here? Okay. So it looks like we have some folks from DCFS. Nice. Love our DCFS folks. Ooh, we got some volunteers, folks from Summit County. Ooh, yay, a bunch of LCSWs. Definitely love my, our mental health professionals coming to get some sweet webinar training. Yay, we got some folks from Michigan, some folks from Kansas. Yes, I don't think we've had folks from Michigan or Kansas on one of our webinars yet, so this is a first. I'm totally feeling it. Ooh, a bunch of folks from up north in Utah, folks from Box Elder County. Oh, we have folks from Idaho as well, and a couple folks from Alabama. Love it. Ooh, St. George folks. Got a bunch of victim advocates, system advocates. Nice. Dang, it looks like we have folks from all over Utah and folks from all over the United States. Love it. Thank you everyone for typing that in. Also, if you do experience audio issues, make sure to click that sound check or the sound troubleshoot button on your control panel and go through those steps and see if there's maybe a setting or something that isn't working for you, or if you're still having some problems, you can absolutely dial in to the number that is in your email. Okay. If you do have any questions or issues, I will definitely be in the answering your questions. Okay. Yes. Maybe one of the reasons why you're here. I am the person who has free CEUs for everyone, right? And this does come with an hour of CEUs. So after the webinar, so tomorrow actually, you will receive an email from GoToWebinar. If you don't get it, it comes about noon Mountain time. Make sure that you check your spam folder to see if you got that email. But there will be a link for this form. Once you fill out the form, you take this little quiz. You have to get at least 70%, and then I will send you that certificate. So I do everything manually. So if you don't, if your score doesn't read 70%, just remember that I do have to score several of the questions manually. Okay. All right. So let's get into it. So today we're going to talk about the role of an advocate in safety planning. Real excited for this. All right, and so some of our objectives, we're going to understand what a safety plan is, and we are going to navigate some of those sections of a safety plan. And Sam's going to give you a lot of really good in-depth information and a lot of pointers and tips when safety planning with folks, right? And we are going to talk about issues and barriers within safety planning and safety planning around that technology use, okay? So for many of you, you definitely know who we are, the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition. For you new folks, we are the federally recognized state's domestic violence coalition for the state of Utah. So all the folks here, your state has a domestic violence, a state coalition, right? Some of you may also have a sexual assault coalition, and some of you have dual coalitions. And I think our folks from Idaho have dual coalition. So yeah, we are a support organization. We're a nonprofit. So our job is to support the folks who are working directly with survivors, right? So we provide training, education, program overviews, other supports, technical assistance, right? And remember, technical assistance on a coalition level is folks reaching out to us and asking questions, what can I do in this situation? Or what are, the best practices, or, what's the latest national research that's coming out? And so we're really good at translating that and getting that information out to folks. So yeah. All right, so I'll introduce myself, and then Sam will introduce herself. All right, so I am Andy Tremonti. You've probably heard my voice for many hours this year. I use they, them, their pronouns. I'm the education and outreach coordinator for the coalition, so I'm over the majority of the education that the coalition offers, right? And I specialize in Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA survivors, and so that's a big part of my outreach job. My education history is in psychology and women and gender studies, and look who's an adult now. I am a criminal justice student. Pretty excited about that. I have a lot of experience working specifically with Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA folks and how they intersect with systems of oppression, different forms of violence, and stuff like that. I am a Sasquatch enthusiast. I do love it. That's something me and Sam share a little bit, right? And this is what I'm working on this week. So this is a wyvern. Yeah, I can never say it. So it's similar to a dragon, but wyverns have 2 legs and 2 wings. Dragons have 4 legs and 2 wings. So this he's actually quite big. It's going to be fun to work on. Here's, of course, my sweet Toriko, being a cute little goose, and my sweet Jorge. I'm loving that laundry. And this week I'm really into drag queens. So that is kind of what's getting me through this week. So I will pass it over to Sam. So Sam, how about you tell us about yourself?
All right, and thank you for that, Andy. I like the little updates there on what's getting you through the week. So yeah, as Andy said, my name is Sam Candland. I am the link line coordinator for the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition. For those who don't know what the link line is, it is the statewide domestic violence crisis hotline for Utah. So if you're familiar with the national hotline, folks from maybe out of state, they might have statewide hotlines in their state. I'm not sure all of the states that do have their own state hotlines through the coalition, but Utah is one of them. So yeah, I oversee that. It's primarily a volunteer-based program, so I do a lot of volunteer recruiting, management of the hotline, taking calls myself, etc. I've been doing that, as it says down here in my little description, for about 4 or 5 years now. Started out as a volunteer, and I just sort of worked my way up. I do have my bachelor's in social work that I finished in 2019, which is really cool. I eventually will get into possibly future MSW, when the world stops ending, we stop having earthquakes and the pandemics and the raccoon water, if you're from Utah, or Magna. I'm pretty close to Magna, so that was a big scare for me. But yeah, so looking into grad school when things are a little more certain in the world. I do have some background in working with folks with disabilities. I spent about 4 years in that field before moving to the coalition work. Again, yeah, started as a Linkline volunteer, and then I moved into a part-time role in 2016, and just worked my way into the volunteer slash Linkline coordinator position in 2017, and that's what I've been doing since. So any questions, concerns, anything involving the crisis hotline work through the coalition, that all gets filtered over to me. And then I know that there are some pics included in this about interests of myself that Andy requested I put in. So if anybody's familiar, we've got a little link action right there, Link from The Legend of Zelda. I wouldn't say overall I'm a huge nerd, but I will say that The Legend of Zelda has been something that I've loved since I can remember. I really clung to the idea of, you know, just being a kid with a sword and a little bit of bravery, and I think that that's something that really kind of helped project me, or as a trajectory or something, into helping fields. I mean, I really just have always wanted to be this helper who can do maybe difficult work and not necessarily you know, get, you know, the fame or the acclaim, but just doing it because it's the right thing to do. Some other stuff I'm interested in here. Let's see, so I wouldn't be a friend of Andy's if I didn't have a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons in me. We'll also note there that there's a little bit of Guy Fieri there, you know, mayor of Flavortown. I don't know why I have quite an obsession with the mayor of Flavortown, but I do. It's my new thing. I've spent a lot of time watching diners, drive-ins, and dives during this stay home, stay safe stuff that we've been doing. So yeah, a little bit about me. Do some Dungeons and Dragons, and I really like the sweet mayor of Flavortown. But my biggest obsession yet, though, that I have on here is my little Ruby Cubie. She is a little Chihuahua mix, tiny little thing compared to apparently the bones that are given to her. But yeah, she's really kind of been the thing that's helped keep me sane through a lot of this, everything that's been going on. She's been really good for me. So yeah, that's my darling little angel there. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. So jumping into this too, what we're going over, as Andy had stated, is, you know, safety planning. What is a safety plan? If you'll jump to the next one, Andy, here. It's a personalized, practical plan that includes ways to remain safe while in a relationship, planning to leave, or after the survivor leaves. It's really just kind of a series of actions or ideas or goals that are going to help people stay as safe as possible in whatever situation they're choosing to be in. And I think that's important. I think a lot of people want to create safety plans that make sense to them as advocates. I know that's something that I've previously had to make sure I'm checking myself on, that I am wanting to do what I think is best, but it's really what's best for the person in the situation that they're in. And really defaulting back to that empowerment-based model, that we don't want to take away any more power of choice from the person than they've already had. So we want to be there to support them with whatever they're trying to be supported with, even if it's something that we don't necessarily agree with. It's something that we want to work through for them, because it's their life, and they should be, you know, autonomous in choosing what they do. Safety planning involves assisting the survivor how to cope with emotions, telling friends and family about the abuse, taking legal action, and more. I mean, it's just the steps to get the stuff done that they're hoping to get done. I know a lot of people are partial sometimes to like safety planning sheets that can maybe give you, you know, a checklist or something like that to look through for, you know, X, Y, and Z situation. I think of it more as something conversational throughout in my, you know, my role throughout hotline calls. It's something that I rarely move into you know, let's move into the safety plan segment of this call. It's something that I'm going with throughout the conversation of the call, and then recapping sort of at the end, and allowing the survivor or secondary survivors or whoever I'm talking to be able to follow up and ask questions as necessary and go over things that maybe came up throughout the conversation, the call, that we didn't have a chance to address that would increase their safety. Okay, and then jump to the next one, Andy. Okay, and as I noted a little bit here, safety planning is not just for survivors. I think that that's something, I don't know how many, I mean, I guess folks in the field will know that anybody can reach out, but it's the same thing for the hotline. I mean, and anybody that we're engaging with, safety planning can be utilized with all types of folks, whoever's contacting us, just trying to keep people safe. So, I mean, survivors, obviously, it's kind of the number one thing that we're doing the work for. But then, of course, we've got the secondary survivors. So the family members, the brothers, the sisters, the parents, the children, the people that maybe are not, the direct target of the abuse, but are maybe receiving some, maybe secondary trauma or harm that's potentially coming, or just being concerned for the person that's in the abusive, situation, dynamic, whatever they're in. Friends, absolutely, same thing. We get a lot of people who are calling in and saying, hey, I've got this buddy of mine that's in the situation and I don't feel that it's safe. What can I do to help? How can I keep them safe? What, as a friend, what am I going to do, be able to do that's most supportive and isn't causing any other harm to the person? Coworkers calling, and I think that this is, I talk about this a little bit in other presentations, but I think that coworkers are a very oftentimes underutilized resource for accessing services or supports or helping keep people safe. I don't know how many people on this webinar right now are familiar with the Susan Powell case or the Cold podcast that came out last year. But in the podcast, it was noted that Susan Powell, prior to her disappearance, had left information, had given information, like written wills, etc., to her coworkers and said, if anything happens to me, if something goes wrong, get this to the police. I trust you as my coworker, who obviously knows my situation, to keep this information safe and away from Josh. And that was something that she was able to utilize. And really, again, yeah, with coworkers, they might be able to use things such as like unmonitored electronics to be able to call hotlines or look at information up on a laptop or something like that. So it's a good resource, and we do get people calling in who are identifying themselves as employers or coworkers of a survivor of abuse. And then also too, I mean, doctors, clergy, social workers, and other professionals. I mean, the first call I ever took was from a bishop trying to help a woman in his ward. So I mean, we get a lot of calls from these folks who are just community members, social workers. I know that the social workers from the calls that I've taken have been really great at wanting to create more in-depth safety plans, get a knowledge of resources, etc., for their clients or the person or people that they're working with throughout the community. And that's great. I mean, if people have questions, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help, and that's good. I think that a lot of people don't necessarily know that they can reach out to these support services to get information, but they absolutely can. Again, doctors calling in, how to, knowing that healthcare providers in specific situations are mandatory reporters, not just mandatory reporters for child abuse or vulnerable adult abuse, but also with, if injuries were caused by a weapon or by criminal means or something like that, the healthcare mandatory reporting thing would kick in. But we talk to doctors about, or our nurses about, okay, you got to make a call to the police. What's the best, order of operations to do that? We want to make sure we're not blindsiding the survivor by just having the police show up and not telling them. So what can we do? What information can we give them before we have to make contact with law enforcement? Make sure that we can keep them as safe as possible in the situation that they're currently in. Yeah, there are a whole slew of people, anybody calling in, anybody you're engaging with in person. I know that this isn't really the time to engage with people in person, but anybody that you're engaging with is totally okay to start safety planning with, because it could be information they don't even necessarily know that they could benefit from. but has absolutely been, eye-opening information for them when engaging with folks or survivors that they're engaging with. Okay, so traits of an effective safety plan here. So let's see, it's created in collaboration. Again, we can't create a safety plan just based off of our knowledge of resources. We want to collaborate with the person that is reaching out and wanting safety planning information. And we also want to, create it in collaboration with the various community partners. I mean, it's great. I think at the, at the coalition, for example, we've got a lot of maybe resources or connections just in-house information that we can utilize with just our people. But again, as somebody who's working on the hotline, I know how beneficial it is to be able to collaborate with the domestic violence service providers or the rape crisis centers or the family justice centers or whatever, to make sure we're getting the most effective services provided to the people in need of safety planning. Making sure that it's survivor centered. Again, we want to meet the survivors where they are, not where we want them to be. That was something that I know a lot of, myself, when I first started engaging with hotline work, I had to really check myself, make sure that I wasn't doing something or wasn't pushing ideas that weren't going to be effective, or I wasn't meeting the survivor where they were mentally, emotionally, physically, anything like that. And it's something that I know the other people getting into the field might have some stressors around, but still making sure that, again, they're the experts in their situation. They know what's best for them, and we want to trust them with that, and encourage them to reach out as needed if anything changes in the future. It's helpful in any stage of the relationship. Again, a safety plan isn't just for if somebody is choosing to leave or has left an abusive relationship or dynamic. It's helpful if they've left, if they're choosing to stay. A lot of people in abusive relationships choose to stay with the person for a variety of reasons, and that's okay. How do we keep people as safe as possible in that situation? If they've already gone, how do we keep people from? We get a lot of callers sometimes that will say, I just needed to call this hotline because if I didn't call them, or I didn't call you, I was going to call them, and I need to know how I can, make it through the rest of the night, what things I can maybe do to distract myself so I'm not reaching out to them. Again, safety plans like that, it meets the needs that are important to the survivor. We don't want to overwhelm them with too much information that isn't relevant to their particular situation. I mean, again, I could know that a protective order or something like that could be very beneficial potentially to the caller, to the person that I'm engaging with. But if their focus is on therapy, and that's what they want to, how do we stay safe, just like mental health wise and stuff, I don't want to push too much information that they're just not asking for. And just, again, encouraging them that they can reach out, again, letting them, maybe touching on the topic, but not overwhelming them with information that is irrelevant to what they're asking for. You want to empower the survivor to stay safe. Again, keeping people as safe as possible in whatever situation they're choosing to be in. And we want to prepare survivors for many different scenarios, just the what ifs. And again, we can go into, the what ifs of this, that, and the other, but again, sometimes we're just talking to people about what if you go into shelter. What is that going to look like for your life? What is it going to look like if you get a protective order versus not getting a protective order? It's not something we're not telling them, this is exactly what's going to happen, but we're just helping them explore ideas potentially that could come up, or ideas that we've heard of from other people, or situations we've heard of other people experiencing if they've gone certain routes, and allowing them to choose from the options that are potentially available to them. Okay, so let's see. When should we safety plan? Always. Should just delete this slide and just put in big, red, bold, flashing letters, just always. But that's what it is. I think that, again, a lot of people get caught up on the idea of a safety plan needs to be this like official form that we, need to fill out. But it's, for me, so much of it, it's just a conversation. How are we going to keep you safe, like with what you're going through right now? So yeah, when a survivor is ready to leave, when a survivor is staying with their abusive partner, when we are concerned for the safety and the well-being of a survivor, with family members, coworkers, and friends of survivors, with professionals working with survivors, just really anybody that we're engaging with. We want to offer bits of information, suggestions, what if scenarios, resources that could help benefit somebody in ways that'll help them stay safe. Let's see. So, okay, how to begin a safety plan. So we want to listen to the survivor's experience. Again, each situation is unique. I know that we're dealing with a lot of similarities in situations. We've got, and I like I talk to the hotline advocates that I train, and tell them, like, look, there's so many different situations that could come up, and every situation is unique. There are only so many resources that we can refer to. Still treating each situation that we're talking to, each caller, each person that's walking into our agency as a unique scenario, because it is. There are similar contexts, there are similar dynamics, but it's all depending on where they're at, or even depending on the day of the week or whatever, it's going to be maybe different options available to them regarding safety plans. So we want to just make sure that we're paying attention to the specific details of their current situation, and not just assuming it's like the caller we just talked to an hour ago. We want to provide options. Again, we don't want to overwhelm people with too many options and give them all 100 pages of resources that you have or whatever, but we do want to give people, again, options, giving them hopefully that power of choice, that empowerment idea, giving them things to think about that maybe they've not thought about before, or that could be relevant in the future if they change their mind, things like that. Just letting them know that they have a choice in this, and that they're in control of how they navigate it, and that we're there to support them. We want to tailor to meet the needs of the survivor in that moment. Again, it's something that, of course, in the future, things like, I default to protective orders all the time because we get a lot of calls about that. But if we've got somebody that could benefit from a protective order in the future, that's great. But if that's not something that's relevant to their current dynamic or what they're asking for right now, try not to hyper focus on it, because it's something that could make them feel like we're not listening to them, that we're not paying attention to their current needs and stuff. And we don't want them to get frustrated with reaching out to the supports that they've reached out to. We want to listen to the survivor. As I said earlier, they're the experts on their abusive partner. They know the dynamics. We know that sometimes they understand, just for example, that it's safer to stay, that there could be more harm done to them or their family or whoever than if they were that if they stayed than if they had tried to leave, or vice versa. So just keeping that in mind, they know what's best, and we want to trust them with that, and just encourage them to reach out as needed if the situations change. Okay, so the process of safety planning here, we want to assess the situation, just what's going on. On a hotline call, I tell people, like, okay, can you tell me a little bit more about your situation? You don't have to tell me anything that you're uncomfortable with. You don't need to overshare, anything like that. Just give me a little better of an idea of what you're going through. Some people are very reserved, and they don't like to give many details, for fear, shame, distrust of systems. That's totally fine. Some people like to give you all of the information. But yeah, we just want to take whatever information that they're giving us, and if we need to ask follow-up questions, absolutely, but not forcing anybody to divulge anything that they're uncomfortable with. Just getting the information that'll help give us an idea of what at least direction they might be thinking of, and as they get more comfortable with talking to us, they might open up more throughout the conversation. We want to focus on the strengths of the person that we're talking to, the survivor, secondary survivor. Strengths, they could be internal. I mean, we know a lot of the survivors, we know all survivors actually through, that are dealing with abuse are very resilient in a lot of ways. We know that maybe, strengths could be having family engagement, that they have family and friends that care about them, focusing on strengths of, a job. A job is a huge strength to have, knowing that they have some sort of income potentially outside of the abusive partner's financial situation. Other strengths, like having a car could be a strength. That is a huge strength. I don't know how many times I've talked to people that they're like, my family just finally, they bought me this just beat up van, and that was the ticket to me getting out of this place, because I finally had a way to do so. We know that it's huge. I know that it's a huge barrier in Utah with how many rural areas that we have, that if people don't have vehicles, they just don't have access to services. I mean, gosh, even in Salt Lake County, where we've got a ton of access to, maybe like transportation services and stuff, it's still a pain in the butt to navigate. It's just so much easier to have something like a vehicle. So, focusing on those types of strengths, and then also focusing on strengths of maybe your individual organization or community organizations or something like that. Maybe the organization that you work for has a specific grant for like emergency assistance or something like that not every other community service provider has. That gives you an opportunity to maybe do something a little different than maybe the last agency they had engaged with. So just thinking about that awareness of resources that you have access to, your agency has access to, other community agencies have access to, they can help be a strength to the situation that the caller or the client is navigating. You want to identify the immediate and future risks to safety, just flagging maybe ideas that they hadn't thought about before, knowing, just getting a little more information about the situation that they're in, just noting that that we know the only time that they have access to leave is when the abusive partner is home, which could cause greater risk of harm or something like that. Just being aware of like potential pitfalls in safety plans, things like that you can help, if not create an option around, at least flag to somebody that this is something that's a concern of mine. Asking the survivor what strategies they've tried in the past is something, because again, I mean, we know that on average it takes 7 times for somebody to try to leave an abusive relationship. So chances are a lot of the times people have already made attempts, and we want to know potentially where what went wrong before, what happened, why did you end up going back, why did you end up not leaving, what happened there, or potentially like when you tried to leave last time, like what were some great resources in the community, what were some great resources you had access to, what were some ideas that you had that actually worked to your benefit. So just talking about that, people maybe don't necessarily recognize that that certain ideas or situations worked, even if the attempt to leave ultimately failed. So we want to maybe just reiterate that to folks, that it's okay to default to other ideas, where you had the money before or whatever, so they can maybe put those into action again. And we want to provide an array of options. Again, we don't want to overwhelm people, and especially people, if you've got anybody in crisis mode, trying to talk to them can be very, very difficult. We want to de-escalate the crisis and all of that, which is a future webinar, by the way. So look into that. But we want to give people, again, this is going back to the power of choice and the fact that we've got a power and control dynamic, and the survivor doesn't have a lot of, if any, power over their autonomy, their choices, anything like that, because their abusive person in their life has taken that away from them. We want to give them choices. We want to give them options. We want to empower them to make decisions for themselves. That, I mean, sometimes could be difficult, can be complicated for them. They could be scared, and that's okay. I mean, we want to offer those are natural feelings, and we want to offer support for said feelings and just options for the future. But again, giving them that power of choice back is something that's huge when it comes to the safety planning, because we want to empower folks to be able to take control of their lives again. Okay, so planning for all stages. There are a lot of, as we get into the section, there are a lot of safety planning resources out there. By no means am I claiming what we're going through in this next little segment is like a comprehensive list of safety planning options. And if anybody has any ideas around safety planning options that that I'm not mentioning, or you have questions on anything, I mean, please feel free to mention it. Put it in the chat, the question box. Ask. I'm happy to go over that. But these are just some ideas around potential areas that one might need to plan for. Just some ideas that maybe you hadn't thought about before, that can keep people safe in whatever situation, whatever time period of the abusive dynamic that they're in. Okay, so staying safe in the home is obviously a big thing, and I think that's something that's very crucial now, especially when we're told that we have to stay home. In a lot of cases, I mean, I don't know what it's at state to state, hour to hour, but right now I'm under the impression that we're still staying home and staying safe. So we want to think about that. Really considering safer places in the home to go when an incident of violence is about to occur. They're uncomfortable situations. I know still that it's not easy for me to talk to people about. It's not easy for me to acknowledge that I'm talking to somebody sometimes that is going to be potentially actively hurt later on tonight. But we want to have these uncomfortable conversations with people in more frank and honest ways, because again, it could keep people safe. But yeah, considering safer places to go, we obviously want to avoid areas where the children are during incidents, if at all possible. We don't want the children involved. We don't want them hurt. We don't want them to witness it. It could be, physically and emotionally traumatizing for them. We don't want to hurt the kids in any way, or expose them to any of that. Considering it's maybe not a good idea to go hide in a bathroom. I think a lot of people like to go, sometimes maybe lock themselves in the bathroom or something like that, get away, go take a bath. I don't know, whatever the situation is, but there are a lot of hard surfaces in a bathroom that we want to potentially avoid. It's something that, I think that the softest thing in my bathroom right now is my towel rack. And that's, again, a towel rack has a metal bar or something that could be used to potentially harm someone. So keeping that in mind, we want to maybe the same thing, avoiding kitchens. There are a lot of maybe naturally hard surfaces, knives, things like that are available that could be used to harm somebody. Avoiding areas where guns are, potentially like dens or just gun cabinets, anything like that. Just trying to stay away from those areas. We just, as much as we can, we want to minimize exposure to weapons in a violent situation, so it doesn't turn into something lethal. Yeah, just staying away from places, hard surfaces, natural weapons, things like that. There's no place that's really ideal all the time. There's probably hard surfaces in every room, any place that you could really go, but it's probably a little easier to maybe be in the bedroom where there's softer beds and surfaces like that, or a living room or something, than it would be to where everything is really just like naturally hard.
Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had some folks chime in saying, sharp corners in those areas, and someone was talking, about how important it is to trust your gut, especially as advocates and survivors, knowing their situation, that trusting your gut and what are you afraid of, what are you worried about. And one thing that I have done in the past is when meeting with a survivor and doing safety planning, especially around the home, is even like drawing a map of their house and their layout to potentially make like escape routes, and also Asking folks about their windows. Do they know how to open their windows? Do they know how to pop out screens? Do they know how to use their windows? And that might seem a little interesting, but like for example, my house has new 3-pane windows, and they fold out and they do all these things. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out even how to open the window. And that could potentially be a problem, is not knowing how to even understand, the panes. So, yeah.
Sure. Sure. No, and those are great thoughts, and absolutely. I mean, I think that, I mean, even to your point, Andy, with the windows and stuff. I mean, just like there are locks on the windows in the house that I'm living in. That right now I have no idea how to get them off. I mean, I appreciate them on. I like having locked windows, but again, in that situation, I mean, I would have to explore like how would I do that? Because, and then maybe identifying a window that something that somebody, if they need to escape through, or an advocate is trying to safety plan around, for that person in that particular situation, it might not be an option. For me right now in this moment at 10:41 a.m., I wouldn't be able to use my window to get out, because I don't know how to take the lock off the window. So yeah, no, those are great points, and thank you. And I think that's a great idea too, Andy, that you'd mentioned with in regards to planning escape routes. Is even just drawing a map and visualizing it. Like, what does your house look like? I mean, it doesn't need to be this like a wonderful, glorious blueprint, but just an idea of what rooms are there, where are the windows, where are potential exits, what are things to consider when trying to leave or trying to stay safe. So that's a great idea. Thank you. Talking to people about memorizing important phone numbers is a good idea. A lot of times, for example, I think that a good point that I like to bring up is, if you've got maybe somebody who's not from the US, 911 isn't 911 potentially in their country. So just talking to them about, this is the emergency response number, these are the police department, this is the number of the police department if you need to call. It may seem something that, like, obviously you should know. Like, I mean, I've known 911 is 911 my whole life, but something to think about if you're not engaging with somebody who is familiar with the area, or with the country or anything like that. I mean, we want to avoid clothing that can be used to harm the survivor. This is something that maybe we want to avoid scarves and necklaces to avoid any form of strangulation that could occur. One thing that I know that I love with my dog, Ruby, is throwing her in a harness. She's a fast little girl, that dog, and she's small, so trying to grab her from running out the door if she doesn't have anything on her is really, really difficult. But if I have a harness on her, it's like almost 100% guaranteed that I'll be able to grab her before she runs out the front door, because I can snatch that harness. And I would think that it's the same concept with people. Maybe they're trying to escape and they've got necklace, scarf, something like that, something dangly that somebody can grab onto real quick. It could be dangerous to them. Maybe considering piercings or like jewelry, anything dangly like that. Talking to people, just like even like shoes that you wear. It's something that if somebody's considering or trying to plan to leave or something like that, maybe reminding them or putting it out there that could maybe be a little easier to leave or run away or jump the window or whatever if you don't have heels on or something. So getting them used to like wearing flats or something like that. We'll talk a little bit more about children in a minute, but we want to talk to the children about safety. What ideas around safety they have, and it's not necessarily something that has to be like a very like in your face conversation about safety in this abusive dynamic. It can be, absolutely, but it could be ideas around safety anyway. Like, here are emergency numbers that you should memorize. This is the police department, and these are the situations that you would call. If somebody's being hurt, you'd want to call the cops, or talking to them about poison control, all of that. Something that's maybe not as scary for them, depending on the age level, could be a good idea. But talking to them, just having that idea of staying safe and what that looks like. And then jump to okay. Let's see. Making spare keys and hiding them in case you need to flee. So a lot of this stuff too, keeping in mind these are just some ideas around things. It's not a perfect plan. So for example, I mean, making a spare key to like my front door, it's going to cost what, $2 or $3 or something like that. Making a spare key to my car is going to cost like 300. So it's not something that is as easy to do, but still keeping in mind that that's for some people that is a potential option for them, and maybe getting creative as to where they're hiding the spare keys. Maybe under the mat in the front of the house isn't the best idea to do it. Maybe where should we potentially hide things like that? Preparing an emergency bag, and if possible, storing it in a place that's not at the home is probably a good idea. For one, it's not going to expose if the person, like the abusive partner, stumbles upon it, all of these, supplies for leaving, and totally screws the plan up. But it's something, if you've already got it out of the house, it's one less thing that you have to think about if you're trying to leave quickly. Things to keep in an emergency bag. We don't want to worry about the things that can be easily replaced. I mean, and we're thinking again, like keys, important documents, very specific valuables, maybe pictures, things like that, that you really would have a difficult time replacing. I mean, we don't want to replace anything, but as we know, inevitably in abusive relationships and people leaving and stuff, sometimes, tangible possessions are lost. And we want to figure out which ones are going to be the most difficult for them to get back, or get in the future again if they need it.
Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
Got a couple of folks chime in. Someone was saying that if survivors wear jewelry or they like to wear jewelry, can we get like breakaway jewelry, so that some form of pressure or pulling will make the clasp unhook or break, that there hopefully would limit the chance of like ligature strangulation, stuff like that, or some sort of physical control there. And then someone also said, was talking about how folks with abusive behavior are oftentimes shame-based and use shame as a way to gain power and control over others. And they said they encourage survivors to try and move arguments into public spaces, right? In yards, front porches, where folks and neighbors can hear.
Sure, absolutely. No, and that's a great point. I think, because I mean, and I've had people bring that up too, before, that they're like, it got to the point where they weren't even afraid to, have these arguments in public or whatever. But a lot of, you're absolutely right as far as reputations and shame and things like that, that people are maybe comfortable with being abusive inside a closed, confined space, but don't want to be exposed to the public or their family and friends as somebody who would be abusive. And so, yeah, in public spaces, things like that, minimizing maybe alone time with the person in those closed, confined spaces could be a great idea. Absolutely. And the breakaway jewelry, I'm not a jewelry wearer, so I didn't think about that. But that's a great idea. That's something that, yeah, I hadn't even thought about. So thank you for those insights. Okay. Jumping back into this, so creating a code word and sharing it with friends, family, neighbors to alert them when violence is about to occur or is occurring. It doesn't have to be something that's so 007 with like super code phrases or something. It could just be something as simple as, I'm going to send the kids over to your house now if you're talking to a neighbor. Just something so that they know what's going on. They know, something, violence might occur, or that they need to call the police, or call the survivor's family and friends to come get the kids, or something like that. Just whatever plan somebody might feel comfortable with creating with somebody. Talking about, is the survivor in a place where their identity is accepted or rejected? For some folks, again, natural resources that we might think about. I mean, I'm talking a lot about family and friends and default to them and talk to them, but is it going to be a safe idea for somebody, for example, who is, LGBTQIA plus, somewhere falling in that, under that umbrella, to reach out to their family members who are, heavily anti-LGBT plus? Like, is that something that's going to increase their safety? Is that something or is that something that's going to continue to potentially harm them? Maybe the family won't, cause any physical harm, but that emotional and mental damage, that trauma, is something that we still want to be aware of in navigating when we're trying to talk safety planning. And then, really getting into it, if violence is occurring, we want to, make yourself as small of a target as possible, covering as much of the body as possible, considering maybe if you need to, talking to the person about, kind of fetal position, covering the head, but the sort of bundling up, trying to minimize any, contact from fists or kicks or something like that to internal organs that could be damaged. I mean, it's a hard conversation to have with people, but we want to see if we know that this is inevitable, how do we keep you as safe as possible in that situation. Okay, so jumping into safety with children. Again, so going back, like I mentioned before, I mean, teaching them how to call 911 is something that could be beneficial. Again, it doesn't have to be something like, when me and your other parents are fighting, this is what you need to do. It can be if it's appropriate, of course, but it could be a more simple conversation about just exposing them to the idea of emergency numbers and what they do and how they function and all of that. Directing them to a safe place to go if abuse begins to occur, just getting them out of the house if we can, getting them out of at least the room. We don't want them to witness it. Even the verbal abuse is something that could be, significantly harmful to the children to hear or be witness to. And we want to minimize any exposure to that. Creating a code word that maybe indicates that they should leave the area. Again, it doesn't have to be so 007, just getting them, okay, it's time, I think it's time for you to go do your homework now. Or I think it's time for you to go play with your friends, or, it's something along those lines. It just gives them some indication that they shouldn't be in the room, they shouldn't be in the space anymore as tension is increasing, to minimize, again, any harm that they could experience from it. Talking to them about how this is not their fault. This is something that is huge. I have a lot of people on the hotline who maybe aren't aware of how impactful or damaging abuse is, even to just be witness to it for children, or they're in complete denial. I have plenty of people who try to tell me, they'll describe extremely graphic scenarios, and when I bring up the kids on the hotline, they're like, oh, no, my son was in his room, he doesn't know. Well, kids are not stupid. I mean, look, come on. When, if my parents ever fought or anything like that as a kid, I was well aware of it, even if I was, up in my room doing homework, quote unquote. It was something that, again, they're aware of, and thinking about it too, that let's just say, for example, there's a PSA, and I believe it's on the playlist on our UWC YouTube page, where Andy keeps all of our videos that we use in webinars and trainings. But there's a PSA where essentially I'm assuming in this case, the father walks into the home, the son is eating breakfast at a table, turns to go look at the father, and ends up spilling the cereal onto the floor. The father, rushes over to the son and starts to get aggressive towards them. But I'm assuming the mother in the situation steps in to try to intervene from the father harming the son in this, and so he turns and attacks the mother. But thinking about that, that if you've got the situation, this kid who's witnessing this, I mean, what they could potentially think, daddy hits mommy because I spilled the cereal, right? And that, I mean, thinking about like what a trauma could be associated with that when it comes to meals, when it comes to cereal, when it comes to, just eating in general, anything like that. I mean, kids could internalize that. And so again, having those conversations and letting them know that this isn't about them, and yeah, and reminding them that you love them and you care about them and all that. And telling them to never try to intervene if abuse is occurring. It's something I know a lot of, like, particularly a lot of teenagers like to get involved and maybe step up and defend or something like that, the parent who's being abused. We want to minimize and just tell them as much as we can to stay away. This isn't about them. We don't want them harmed. and it's going to just be, it's more beneficial to potentially to the survivor, or reminding the survivor to tell them that it's more beneficial to them if they stay away. It makes the situation better for them, and so hopefully just getting it into the children's head that it's not a good idea to intervene. Potentially enrolling them in counseling if possible. It's something that, again, we get a lot of people who reach out to the hotline, mention that they have kids, they've been in extremely abusive relationships, and are looking for therapy for themselves. I like to plug too, like, oh, there are also options through this domestic violence service provider for free therapy for this child too, if you want. That's something to look into, because again, even if they aren't the direct target of the abuse, there could be some trauma that is associated with the family dynamic that they've been in. And then, yeah, if not possible, creating a list of people with them they'd feel comfortable talking to about what their, their feelings and everything. I do like to remind people that with all of these systems, I mean, in Utah, and I'm assuming throughout the US, we're mandatory reporters for child abuse. Folks, systems, they have to report. But it's still, that's not a reason to keep children out of counseling and getting them that emotional support. So just gentle reminders so they're not blindsided, but still encouraging, like, look, it's going to be, I think, extremely beneficial for your child to be able to talk about this or go through play therapy or whatever to be able to not hold on to the trauma that they've experienced. Okay, and then go to the next one. Okay, so if possible, get the child a cell phone. Easier said than done sometimes, but I mean, potentially, again, I think I laugh more because, a cell phone when I was a kid was like this extremely like rare occurrence, and now you've got like 8-year-olds who have their iPhones and stuff. But if possible, get the child a cell phone and create a customized safety plan with them, whether it be with using the cell phone, or just, again, if this situation happens, or if you see this is who you call, this is what you do. If we're me and your other parent are fighting, call the neighbor and ask if you can go over there. Something, just a cell phone plan, teaching them maybe like how to, different websites that they can look at to help get ideas. I know at the end of this we go into like children's or youth resources for abuse, as far as like loveisrespect.org and stuff like that. But just helping them navigate that in the cell phone and and all of that. Teaching them to avoid areas where weapons can be found. Again, just the same thing. We don't want abuse to be occurring or a fight to be happening and the children to be maybe playing in the room where all the guns are at. Just keeping them away from that if possible. We want to avoiding custody exchanges at the home. This is, again, this is the same thing that one of the other attendees had mentioned earlier, that there's maybe less chance of somebody doing something radical if it's in public, because there is that shame, that exposure it's associated with it. So if possible, do these exchanges in public, at banks, at DCFS buildings, at police departments, at the child's school if possible. We've got, if you're able to, if you have a situation where you can have, a custody agreement where one parent drops the child off in the morning and the other parent picks the child up in the afternoon and then, drops them off the next day or whatever, however the custody exchange works. That just makes it so you don't ever have to engage with the abusive partner. So if possible, maybe doing something like that, with a friend or family member, so the survivor is not alone. I do like to talk to people about who they are bringing with them to these exchanges. It's maybe not the best idea sometimes if you have an extremely jealous ex to bring your new partner with you. That could exacerbate a situation. It could amplify or make something dangerous. I mean, again, the survivor knows what's best for their situation, so trusting their gut, knowing what's best for them, of course, but just at least flagging that to them, like, look, if this person has had extreme turmoil with your ex or whoever in the past, maybe it's not the best idea to throw that into the meetup or whatever also. Okay, next one. Okay, so safety with pets. Safety with pets is hard. I definitely know it's hard because again, I like to think that, and I know that there's still so few resources for pets that are like cats and dogs and stuff. Um, but it's even harder when you've got things, you've got like horses, or my grandma, for example, has literally like 16 birds, and I think about that all the time. Like, I mean, she's in a fine marriage, but thinking about like if something were to happen, like what would she do with all of her birds? I can't imagine any shelter is going to want 16 parrots in their shelter that will not stop squawking or even have the capacity to take that on. So it could be more challenging, but some ideas around that here. If possible, trying not to leave the pets alone with the abusive partner. Um, uh, like for example, like I've got, um, I work from home now, so of course I can have my dog with me, but in a typical situation, I feel very privileged. If I needed to take my dog to work with me, I can usually. UDVC is able to support that. So thinking about that, like if that's something that's an option for people, um, dropping the dog off at like a doggy daycare. I know that my dog loves her little doggy daycare. Just things like that of potential options, so they're not stuck in the home with the partner, incurring any abuse. Gathering all necessary paperwork for pets and making sure that they're in the survivor's name. I had no idea how much of a pain in the butt it is to get things done for pets without the necessary paperwork until I got Ruby. I was like, all right, cool, that makes sense, I guess. But yeah, to get her nails clipped, I have to, have this paperwork and I have to have these tags and all that stuff. And it's going to be so much more of a pain in the butt to have to replace those. So when you're gathering the paperwork for yourself, social security cards, stuff like that, this is also something to consider. Any registration, any vets, immunization records, anything like that. Talking to the family, friends, or vet about temporary care if planning to leave. Some places might have options. Right before all this stuff happened, and I was going to end up talking to Ruby's little doggy daycare to see if they know of any resources, or if they themselves, if somebody's in an abusive relationship, if they're able to take dogs on like that, or whatever. But just having those conversations with people, like, look, do you know of options, or do you have any ideas or resources that I could maybe connect with if I was trying to leave, if I needed to have my pet stay somewhere temporarily. Changing the veterinary clinic if necessary. That's just, again, maybe changing routes, things like that. This could also be something to switch up. It's maybe you have a veterinarian that you love, and I totally understand that, but it could potentially be safer to go to one that's on like the opposite side of town or something like that, that isn't going to give away your location to the abusive person. Avoiding leaving pets outside or alone if possible. You've moved and you've got a yard now, but you've got somebody who is maybe stalking or has harmed the pet in the past. If you got them outside, that could potentially be an easy way to snatch the pet or hurt the pet or something. So maybe considering keeping them indoors or something, just so there's less potential harm towards the pet. And really, yeah, like I was saying a little bit ago, contacting various local service providers. Depending on where you're at, there might be options. For Utah specifically, you've got a few places here. Purple Paws up in Summit County is a great resource. They have to go through a service provider, of course, but still getting them maybe connected to that organization. Talking to humane societies. Another place in Salt Lake County here is Diggity Dog Resort. The National Domestic Violence Hotline website has a good map. If you go to their like safety with pets section, it gives you a map of the United States, and you can click on or like put in a zip code, and it'll give you potential options or places that are around that zip code for pet care, that people may be able to take their pets and keep them temporarily so they can leave the abusive situation safely. So yeah, just some things to consider there with pets. The next one.
Oh, Sam, someone said that in Summit County, there's a program where the local shelter will take care of pets for victims of DV. So that could be potentially something that other local animal shelters may do for DV victims and survivors.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great thing. And again, like if people know like local resources, yeah, feel free to plug them into the chat there, or letting people know, because it's, again, you can't have too many resources. I mean, especially when you've got a situation where there already aren't enough resources. So if you have things, plug it in there. That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so jumping into safety when leaving, if possible, leave when the partner is not home. That you probably don't want to, leave, flip them off on the way out. That's not gonna lead to anything good. So just to avoid that contact altogether if possible. Leaving when they're at work, leaving when they're just not in your face about something is something that could help increase safety. Yeah, packing a bag ahead of time and keeping it in a secure location, including the important documents, items, anything that you may need. Just those things that are really hard to replace are the things that we're talking about. I mean, if you can take whatever, like, please encourage people to take what they're capable of taking. But if they can't take everything, or if they can take little to none, let's just make sure we're targeting, financial records, tax information, just things like that, things that can do a lot of maybe damage if the abusive partner still has, or could be very, very hard to replace. Having a plan of where to go and how you will get there. This is a huge, huge thing that they can come up on the hotline. I would imagine that shelter advocates also run into this, where they've got a caller, reaching out to their hotline and saying, all right, I'm on my way. Hope my bed's ready. And unfortunately, there is no bed available there, or at any of the bordering shelters or service providers or anything like that. And so then that leaves the person, all right, well, I'm either homeless now, or I go back to this abusive person who could now be very angry at me for leaving or whatever. So just talking to people, I really like to emphasize on hotline calls, like, just get all of your ducks in a row before you make a grand escape or gesture or anything. Making sure that all of the pieces are in order, because we don't want to, of course, anything could go wrong at any point in time, but we want to minimize the likelihood of somebody being forced to go back, or other harm occurring to the individual or their children or anything like that. Telling only trusted people your plan, I think that's, I get a little bit like paranoid soapboxy about, like, who do you really trust? But really thinking about it, like, okay, so you might like love and adore your children, hopefully, but if you tell your child that you're going to grandma's this weekend, and they tell the other parent that, oh yeah, Daddy said we're going to grandma's this weekend, or whatever, that could expose the entire plan. That could throw a wrench in everything and make people have to start over, and it could increase danger, things like that. So just really being careful about who knows what information. I know that, like, just in like specific communities, it comes up here. I know that it's come up for like, let's just for example, like plural families, like people within just like that community as a whole, they might have or be able to expose more information to other people within that community that could completely like thwart a plan. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep people, again, as their plans as safe as possible. So keeping in mind who you're telling, and talking about, even just talking to people about like confidentiality, and what the different like confidentiality restrictions or requirements are for different advocates. So for example, like the difference between a systems-based advocate versus a community-based advocate. Systems-based advocates are technically classified, I think the title is victim witness advocates. And technically they work under kind of the jurisdiction of the prosecution. So some information might be exposed to somebody, versus maybe a community advocate who has more protections, like federally, or even depending on the state, through like VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, to maintain that confidentiality. So just having conversations with people around who can maintain really confidential or privileged communications, or what resources might have more exposure of your information. Alerting trusted people about the situation. So talking to the children's school, potentially, letting them know, hey, I have a protective order against so-and-so, they shouldn't show up here, etc. This is, this is what it is. Can you be aware, give a call or contact the police or whatever if you see this person, whatever the situation warrants. Talking to your work or your school about like, hey, look, if you see this car driving by, or if anybody's sending me anything or whatever, can you let me know? Or can I get an escort to and from classes or something like that to be able to stay safer in the situations that I'm in. Talking to, again, your family, friends, neighbors, potentially, if able, creating a little community watch and just giving people a heads up. But also, noting too that sometimes those people aren't safe to talk to. Maybe the neighbors are like really best friends with the abusive person. Not maybe a good idea then to reach out to them. But yeah, just some avenues that could potentially be explored. And then jump to the next one. Okay, so leaving continued, keeping evidence of the abuse. We'll talk a little bit about this in the end too, but like stalking logs, pictures, things like that are going to be really, really relevant, potentially, even if somebody doesn't want to initially go into like engaging with the law enforcement. I talk to people, they're like, I don't think I need a protective order right now. I don't need a stalking injunction right now, anything like that. That's fine. But if it changes in a month or two or something like that, it could be good to just hold on to the evidence now. So maybe start thinking about that. Saving up money if possible. Easier said than done sometimes, but people might get creative, might need to get creative with stuff. So, talking about this grocery bag story here, there was a situation where a woman who was in an extremely abusive relationship, and particularly financially abusive, was not allowed to have any access to money, any access to her own funds, anything like that. And her abusive partner would go to the grocery store and map out the exact costs of things. And so when he sent her to the grocery store with money, if she was a penny over or a penny under or anything like that, it was going to be hell to pay. But what he hadn't figured out was that at this particular grocery store, that they were doing like a recycling program. So if you took in plastic bags, you'd get a penny back for your plastic bag. So this woman just went through and kept returning, recycling these plastic bags, and at a penny at a time, a penny at a time, a penny at a time, ended up getting enough money saved for a bus ticket to be able to leave the city and get back to her home, family. So thinking about that, again, getting creative with maybe ideas that of ways to save money or get access to funds and stuff. Different surveys people might be able to fill out for $20 gift cards for Amazon or something. That could be extremely beneficial to people. So yeah, getting creative with that. Making sure the car always has gas and it's backed in the driveway. Just things like that. It's going to be a lot easier for somebody to flee quickly if they can just pull out real quick. I know that it only takes a few seconds to back out and do your sort of 3-point turn thing that you need to do potentially. But if somebody's got a gun, that bullet's pretty fast. And so we want to be careful of things like that. And again, if somebody, we don't want to run out of gas, especially if maybe you're in a rural area or something like that, where there's not a lot of options or you don't have any money to be able to refill the tank. We want to avoid that potentially being something that impedes an escape plan. Alerting neighbors, again, if safe to do so. Consider getting a different vehicle. Just buy a new car. But really thinking about it, is this something, can I trade in my vehicle, and is it going to be safer to be able to do that, to have a completely different car, rather than something that has been traceable to the partner in the past, if you're trying to keep your location hidden or your new job or something hidden from that person. Okay, next one. Okay, and then jumping into this here, changing daily routines and routes to and from home, to the grocery store, things like that. Getting a PO box instead of having an address listed. Utah does not have an address confidentiality program. Other states do. I feel like previous legislative session, they maybe thought about doing something, and I don't believe that they did. but there, I mean, so there have been talks about it, but still, PO boxes might be an easier route to go. Getting an unlisted phone number if possible, changing passwords and personal accounts, just again limiting exposure or options for people to be able to like get your money or anything like that, or hack into your social media or anything through more simple passwords or passwords that you use for everything or something like that. So just being on top of those things. Okay, next one. Okay, so some emotional safety planning here. We want to seek out supportive people. Just talking to people. Again, I mean, humans are inherently social beings. And one of the things that you want to do, just if somebody is depressed, is get them connected to social support systems. I mean, it's the same concept for folks who are maybe in abusive situations. Who are people that we can connect with that maybe you're not exposing all of your deepest, darkest secrets, but can get you into social settings and make you feel better? Are those social support services? Are those, you know, book clubs or something? Is it family and friends? Like, who are the people that can be supportive to you? Let's see if we can encourage getting you connected to those. Creating a safe space to process emotions, whether that be, you know, your half an hour bath at the end of the night, a way to just debrief, or you get into therapy, or you get into, you know, online support groups or something like that, whatever it looks like. Just a place where you're able to express yourself or feel or decompress emotionally. Talking to people about that. Cultivating self-care tactics as a whole. I mean, what self-care looks to everybody is completely different. To some people it's yoga, to some people it's Dungeons and Dragons. It entirely depends on the person. I mean, I like to talk to people about, you know, before you're in the situation, or what, you know, when we're happier, what did you like to do? Like, what were things that made you happy? And let's see if we can get you reconnected to those things. Discussing what the survivor is already doing to attend to their emotional safety. Some people are really good with like self-care. Some people are really bad with self-care. It entirely just depends. Some people could have really great plans already, and that's cool. And for others, we're gonna have to explore some options and just like, what are your interests? What do you like? And it's hard. I mean, I know finding a hobby is an extremely hard thing sometimes. But again, just tactics for self-care could be beneficial to explore with folks. And talking to people, I mean, reminding the survivor to be kind to themselves. I have so many people on the hotline that like somehow it feels like they are their own worst critics. Like, despite the incredible abuse that they're experiencing, they're the ones that seem to be hardest on themselves. And so talking to them like, look, this isn't your fault. And again, reminding them, offering those little compliments to their strengths and to their character. And you know, just reminding them, like, cause I had a caller the other day that was just dragging herself so bad about how weak she is and how stupid she is and how she can't believe she got herself into this situation. And I mean, I just tried to remind her, like, look, I don't see you as weak. You are strong enough to make this phone call and reach out, and that's something that a lot of people can't do. To me, you're an incredibly strong individual who has been incredibly resilient, and I respect that. And so just like offering that, I mean, these really could be like the kindest things that they've heard about themselves in years, and it can do wonders for somebody's self-esteem. So just don't be afraid to offer those ideas and compliments, and boost somebody up a little bit, and reminding them that it's okay for them to, you know, that this isn't their fault, and all of that, and it's okay to be kind to themselves. Just turn myself on mute. Whoops. Okay, so jumping through this, since we only have a little bit of time, I'm just gonna kind of breeze through it a little bit. I know that I think it's previously, Andy, that you'd done tech safety stuff for the webinars, or is it?
We have both of those sections coming up. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, if you want to go more in depth with tech safety stuff, Andy covers it very, very well. So I strongly encourage you, plug in our webinars again to reach out and watch those, because they're really good. So we'll just jump through this kind of briefly because we just have more in-depth material. But yeah, some tech ideas or safety planning around tech, we'll jump into here. Okay, so just some examples of tech abuse and safety planning that could come up. Some things that are maybe a little more obvious: unwanted or repeated calls or text messages. I think a lot of people don't recognize that this is tech abuse. This is actually something that they're like, yeah, they only contacted me 300 times today. I'm like, not a big deal. Like I think that it's minimized to a lot of people, and I'm like, whoa, if somebody contacts me 300 times in a year, I have a problem. So let's talk about that. um, Breaking into someone's social networking accounts, whether it be to snoop, whether it be to post, malicious information or whatever, just getting access to those social networking accounts could be very problematic. Pressure to share embarrassing or private pictures, pressure for sending nudes and things like that. Things that could potentially be exposed to, their friends or put on the internet. I think the next one, the jumping down, posting nude photos without consent, sending, the any homemade, like videos or recordings or something like that to these maybe like porn websites, where the survivor then has to pay like $700 to get them removed if they get removed. It's something that can be extremely problematic. Breaking into somebody's email accounts, and it says breaking in, like it sounds like it's such a almost like a violent action, but just accessing people's social media and emails and all of that without consent is problematic. Um, Intercepting Wi-Fi signals. I mean, that's something that could be. I wouldn't even say that it's a little more hardcore in this day and age with technology, but it could be something that somebody is doing, is jumping into. That I know that was something that I had a caller one time who was based out of Utah, but her abusive partner was still living in California after she had left, and he was getting in her Wi-Fi from California. I mean, it was something, and she's like, I don't know how to stop it. I know it's happening, I just don't know how to stop it. And she's like, reporting to the police was difficult. They didn't know how to stop it either. I don't know what to do, and her hands were really kind of tied because it was nobody was able to support her through that. We can jump to the next one. Some devices and things to consider that could be exposed: computers and cell phones, social media, email, cordless phones. I mean, all these things are pretty basic, like the standard maybe pieces of technology that you might think of. As you'll see, I mean, especially with advancements in technology, there are a lot of other areas that can be exposed. Smart devices are a huge thing that are extremely problematic, that can cause a number of issues because of the connections to, banking information, credit cards, just schedules, things like that, that could be exposed just from accessing the smart tech in your home. Okay, jump to the next one. Okay, some things here, common ways that people use technology is abused by their partners. Maybe GPS tracking is something, throwing a tracker on a phone, through an app, throwing a tracker on a car, things that are maybe a little more obvious, or things that you might have seen in, pop culture or something through movies. GPS tracking, I just said that's right. Keystroke logging hardware that, I mean, again, you can erase your browsing history, but if you've got keystroke logging hardware on there, they're seeing that you're typing in that you went to udvc.org and thehotline.org and, ywcautah.org. I think, I don't know, I can't remember what their website is, but still, you're seeing a pattern of things that the person is looking up, even if the person thinks that they're being meticulous by clearing any cookies or browsing history or anything like that. Hacking into cell phones, email, and social media. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to. It can be that somebody is much more aware of how tech works, and they're literally getting the more aggressive hacking in. But again, access to and utilizing and getting into apps and reading messages and stuff like that without consent is still problematic. Excessive texting, emailing, or calling. I think, again, people are so used to being, I think, that immediate gratification of having information and having immediate contact through the developments in technology that have occurred over the last, since I was a kid. I'm a millennial, so I've got the half, old school stuff versus now the new tech stuff. But But yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people disregard this because they think that we just live in a world where you should have access to information pretty easily, but it's something that can be incredibly problematic. And again, intercepting Wi-Fi signals is something that people are able to do that might use ways to abuse technology to cause harm. Jump to the next one. So some ways for survivors to stay safe here: purchasing a prepaid phone, getting a different phone, things like that. Checking cell phone account to see if any parental monitoring has been activated on their phone. Checking their apps and their messages to see if the person has shared the survivor's location with themselves, to monitor them. I mean, really, I've talked to a lot of people. Just knowing how to use your technology has been, or knowing how to use my technology has been extremely beneficial for me helping callers. I'm you can ask Andy. I am not the tech person at UDVC, but knowing how my phone works has helped me expose this for other people too, so they know how to safety plan around that. Changing passwords on email and social media sites. It seems tedious, and a lot of this stuff is tedious, and a lot of stuff people have to be very proactive in keeping themselves safe. But it could be better than the exposure or access to information that the abusive partner might get and abuse. Checking the cell phone for any unknown apps, turning off the GPS or putting the phone on airplane mode if you're going into maybe like a shelter or something like that, or you're going to an area where you don't want the person to know that you visited. Because, like, for example, let's say the survivor identifies that they are being monitored. How do we navigate that? Maybe they don't want to delete the monitoring because then it alerts the abusive partner that they know. Maybe it's safer to throw things on airplane mode and stuff like that, and just pretend like you don't know, so you can get creative with safety planning. And then checking for any new or unknown or external devices could be of benefit. And then jump to the next one. Okay, just some ideas here. Assessing the tech in the survivor's life and identifying compromised devices. And discussing possible strategies that could help. Always keeping safety in mind. Getting a new or used phone or something like that. New devices aren't always easy or possible. So how do we get flexible or creative with the devices at hand? Again, people maybe have to be very proactive, but there could be ways to navigate it without spending, dropping $1,100 for a new iPhone or something like that. Documenting incidents, discuss creating a stalking log to document things. And explaining how to save emails and text messages, extremely important. And again, like, this is all stuff that Andy will go more in depth later on. So yeah, I think that this is the end of my stuff as far as general resources that we're getting into here.
All right. We got a little special treat for y'all this week. Because we have a special guest, Sam, we are going to play a special edition of our favorite game. Okay, so this week's game is called Sam's Dog or Wild Boar. So put in your guess now. Is this a picture of Sam's sweet Ruby, or is this a super sweet picture of a wild boar? What do you think? What do you think? Welcome, Sam. All right, okay. We have Sweet Ruby, Ruby, Doggy, Dog, Sam's puppy. We've got probably about 80% of folks say wild boar, and
Okay.
about 20 folks percent say Ruby. So let's find out. It is, in fact, it actually is a wild boar. So good job for everyone's guess. Today's picture is a wild boar. All right, so I want to know what y'all are doing for self-care, for self-compassion. And as you know, each week I'm updating you on what I'm doing, right? Definitely this week has been the week of drag queens and Trixie Mattel. And tell me what you're doing for self-care. What are you doing for compassion? Self-compassion. Type those into the box. Ooh, eating chocolate chips right now. Here for it. Ooh, karaoke, jewelry making, hiking, eating healthier, painting with my son, cute, love it. Pup, hanging out with pup, walking a lot, love it. Ooh, cross stitch, Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing. I know of someone, not saying any names, Sam, who does play Animal Crossing.
Yeah,
Ooh,
it's
podcast
an
puzzles.
obsession.
Yeah. Ooh, audiobooks, getting outside, having drinks. Ooh, baking all the bread. Yeah. Ooh, I've been learning how to acrylic paint. Ooh, dang. Definitely give me some tips there. Ooh, doing my nails. Nice. I did paint my nails a couple weeks ago. I don't know if I'm going to revisit that anytime soon, but I love it that y'all are doing such great stuff. Look at that. Ooh, making keychains. That's cool. Dang, it looks like y'all are really doing some cool things to take care of yourself. I love it. I'm here for it. I'm definitely here for it. So um, let's actually, Sam, you tell us what you're doing for self-care this week. What have you been doing, friend?
Oh my gosh. Well, I will tell you right now, it really has been Animal Crossing. That's been the big one. Though it's getting to the point right now where it's getting a little less self-care and a little more um, obsessive and frustrated. So I'm taking a little break from some Animal Crossing. The last week though was okay. I think that right now I'm spending too much time trying to get in-game currency to build bridges, and it's getting a little stressful. But hey, things can be, use stress is a good thing. So maybe it's a good thing for me. But yeah, getting into a perfect little island resort where there's no pandemics and earthquakes has been good for me. So
Oh my gosh, Sam. I respect that. I'm here for it. I am here for it. That's excellent. That's excellent. All right, so let's go over some of the resources. So you will get a copy of this. I will send it to you today in an email. I'll send you a PDF version of it. Okay, so again, love is respect. Super excellent, especially when we're working with youth and folks who are experiencing dating violence. Really great resource, really great resource. Futures Without Violence, I cannot tell you enough how much I respect and really enjoy the information that Futures Without Violence offers on their website. Very good. Break the Cycle, excellent resource for, again, dating abuse and working with youth ages 12 to 24. Very good resource. Hopefully y'all have been checking these out. And if you haven't, here's me reminding you that there's some great stuff out there. NNEDV, the National Network to End Domestic Violence, one of the places that I get a lot of resources and a lot of technical assistance from. Really, really excellent. And they do have this safety net project, which if you haven't looked it up, definitely check it out. All about technology abuse, lovely resources, toolkits for both advocates and survivors. They have an app center, so you can kind of check out, hey, what are some apps that look promising? What are some apps that maybe are problematic? Really cool, right? Of course, we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Really, really great resource, especially as a starting point. If you have questions, you're trying to figure out, hey, what do I do? What's available in my area? I don't know what's up, right? Maybe I haven't made connections yet. I'm new to the field of physician. Call them. They can connect you to local resources. They can give you national resources and a lot of really, really great information. Yeah, excellent. Strong Hearts. You've heard me say it before. I love this resource, Strong Hearts. It's for Native survivors. Their blog, their website has such great articles and resources. I really, really enjoy it. And they are open. Their hotline is open every day from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. And excellent resource. Couldn't suggest them stronger. And then we have UCASA, our sibling coalition. So UCASA has great resources online as well as an app. So you download that app. There's a lot of really good information, a lot of tracking stuff that you can look up on there. And also there's that 24-hour sexual violence crisis hotline for the state. And of course us. So Sam, the lovely person that you are, heard today, is the one that runs our link line. So chances are that you may talk to Sam when you call. But this is an excellent resource. Sam, would you give us a little elevator pitch on how awesome the link line is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is really, if you're familiar with 211, as far as just like accessing resources and stuff, we actually started from 211 in the 90s. And then in 2006, the coalition adopted the hotline. But I mean, it's great. I mean, our goal is to link people to services, hence the link line. And so, I mean, really, if you have any questions, you know of anybody that has any questions, I think a lot of people have this idea that the crisis hotline for the state is only for survivors, but I mean, our goal is to help anybody. We want to get people connected to the resources that are going to best benefit them. We've got great advocates trained based out of Utah that understand the state, that understand those dynamics, that geographically or socially or whatever that might be very beneficial. So yeah, I mean, please feel free to reach out. I'm really big on community supports, reaching out and connecting to one another. Not a territorial person, and yeah. So please, again, if you know of anybody or if you yourself have questions, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to look into stuff for you.
Nice, thank you for that, Sam. And of course, you can find us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, our YouTube, which has our recorded webinars, a whole bunch of great stuff. So if you're like, dang, it is 2 a.m., I can't sleep, I've already, eaten 3 bowls of cereal, and I would just like to hear a soothing voice, you could definitely get on there and hear my voice for as long as you. And then we, of course, have our website, the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition, udvc.org. It has a lot of great resources on there as well. So here's my contact information, which you already know. You've heard from me for many hours already this year. But I want to give Sam's information. So this is Sam's information. You can reach her at 801-521-5544, and her extension is 102. And this is her email. So yeah, get a hold of her. If you have any questions, comments, you can also reply to my email, and I can link you with Sam. So thank you everyone for being on this webinar. Thank you everyone for participating. And I hope, as always, that you have an excellent week, staying safe, staying healthy, and living your best life. So thank you, friends, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.